Nina Torres wiped down the counter for what felt like the 100th time that evening. The Red Rose Diner was quiet now, just past midnight. With only a few late-night customers scattered across the worn vinyl booths, her feet ached in shoes that needed replacing months ago. But new shoes meant less money for Mom's medication. She glanced at the corner booth where Brennan sat alone, like he did every Tuesday night. The man was a walking contradiction in pressed designer suits, sitting in her rundown diner, ordering simple coffee and apple pie. For 6 months now, he had been her most regular customer. Always polite, always generous with tips, always alone. The storm before calm tonight, something was different. Lucas's usual calm demeanor had cracks in it. His tie hung loose, his hair was slightly disheveled, and he had barely touched his pie. Nina approached with the coffee pot, her waitress instinct sensing trouble. "Refill, Mr. Brennan?" He looked up, and she saw something desperate in his gray eyes. "Actually, Miss Torres, I need to ask you something unusual." Nina set down the pot, curiosity overriding her exhaustion. "I'm listening." The impossible request. Lucas took a deep breath. "I need you to be my wife for 30 days. I'll pay you $200,000. The words hung in the air like smoke. Nina stared at him, certain she had misheard. "I'm sorry, what?" "I know how it sounds," Lucas said quickly, "but I'm desperate. I have investors flying in from Boston tomorrow. The Henderson family only does business with married men. They believe family values equal business stability." Nina sat down across from him without asking permission. "And you're not married." "Oh, it's supposed to be," Lucas admitted, pain flickering across his face. "My fiancée, Julia, left me 3 days ago. She took confidential files and gave them to my competitor. The Hendersons moved up their visit, and if I don't close this deal, I'll lose my company. 300 people will lose their jobs." Nina's hidden pain. Nina studied the man across from her. She had served him coffee dozens of times, but never really looked at him. Now she saw the shadows under his eyes, the tension in his shoulders, the genuine worry in his expression. "Why me?" she asked quietly. "You're honest," Lucas said simply. "I've watched you handle difficult customers with grace. I've seen you split your tips with the new waitress. I've noticed you speak fluent Spanish with the kitchen staff and perfect English with everyone else. You're intelligent, kind, and real. Everything Julia wasn't." The words touched something deep inside Nina, but she pushed the feeling away. "This is insane." "Completely," Lucas agreed. "But I'm offering you $200,000 for 30 days of pretending." The weight of choices. Nina's phone buzzed in her apron pocket. A text from her brother Miguel flashed on the screen. "Hospital called. Mom's treatment can't wait much longer. They need the full payment." Her mother's cancer treatment cost $180,000. Insurance had denied the claim, calling it experimental. Nina had been working 3 jobs, saving every penny, but she still needed $60,000 more. Time was running out. Lucas must have seen something change in her face. "Whatever you need the money for, I won't ask questions. This is purely business." "Purely business," Nina repeated, the words tasting bitter. "Lying to people about being married?" "Think of it as acting," Lucas suggested. "A role you play for 1 month. Then we dissolve the marriage quietly. You get your money, and we both move forward." The contract. Nina should have said no. Every rational part of her brain screamed that this was wrong, dangerous, foolish. But she thought of her mother in that hospital bed, growing weaker each day. She thought of Miguel trying to study for medical school while working nights to help with bills. She thought of her own dreams, put on hold for so long she barely remembered what they were. "I have conditions," she heard herself say. Lucas straightened, hope lighting his features. "Name them." "Everything in writing. Separate bedrooms. I keep my job here at the diner. And when this is over, we never speak of it again. Done." Lucas pulled out his phone. "My lawyer can have the contracts ready in 2 hours. Can you meet at my office at 3 in the morning?" Nina glanced at her watch. Her shift ended at 1. "I'll be there." Crossing the line, as Lucas left the diner that night, pressing a business card into her hand with his office address, Nina felt like she was standing at the edge of a cliff. One step forward and everything would change. One step back and her mother might die. She looked around the diner at the cracked leather seats, the flickering neon sign, the grease-stained walls. This place had been her second home for 5 years. Honest work for honest pay. Now she was about to lie for money, but it wasn't really lying, she told herself. It was survival. It was saving her mother's life. It was giving Miguel a chance to finish school. It was 1 month of pretending in exchange for a lifetime of possibilities. The decision made at 3 in the morning, Nina stood outside the gleaming glass tower that housed Brennan Hotel's headquarters. She could still turn back. She could walk away, keep her dignity, find another way. Then her phone buzzed again. Miguel's text was simple. "Mom asked about you tonight. She wanted to make sure you're not working too hard. She loves you, sis." Nina took a deep breath and walked through the revolving doors. A security guard directed her to the 40th floor. Lucas was waiting in a conference room with a man in a suit who introduced himself as Robert Chen, attorney at law. "Shall we begin?" Robert asked, spreading papers across the table. Nina looked at Lucas one more time. "After this, there's no going back." "After this," Lucas said quietly, "everything changes." They signed the contracts as dawn broke over the city, neither knowing that some pretend things become more real than truth itself. The sun was barely up when Nina stood in her tiny apartment, staring at the open suitcase on her bed. What did a fake wife pack for 30 days of deception? Her clothes suddenly looked shabby against the memory of Lucas's designer suit and polished shoes. Her neighbor, Mrs. Chen, knocked softly. "You sure about this, Mia? Moving in with a man you barely know?" Nina forced a smile. "It's a job opportunity, nothing more." But as she zipped the suitcase, her hands trembled. This wasn't just a job. This was stepping into a completely different world. A world apart Lucas's. The penthouse occupied the entire top floor of the Brennan Tower. Nina stepped off the private elevator and froze. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed the entire city below. The furniture looked like it belonged in a museum. Everything gleamed with expensive taste. "Your room is down the hall," Lucas said, appearing from what looked like a home office. "First door on the left. It has its own bathroom." Nina walked down the hallway, her worn sneakers silent on marble floors. The guest room was bigger than her entire apartment. A king-sized bed dominated the space, covered in silk sheets. The bathroom had a tub that could fit 3 people. "This is too much," she whispered. Lucas stood in the doorway. "You'll need to get comfortable here. The Hendersons arrive tonight. They'll expect us to look like a real couple." Learning to lie, the afternoon passed in a blur of preparation. A stylist named Patricia arrived with racks of clothing. "Mr. Brennan's wife needs to look the part," she said, eyeing Nina's jeans critically. Nina tried on dress after dress, each one costing more than a month of her wages. Patricia settled on a navy blue cocktail dress that somehow made Nina look elegant rather than overdressed. "You have good bone structure," Patricia said approvingly. "Natural beauty. That's rare in Lucas's world." After Patricia left, Lucas called Nina to the living room. "We need to get our story straight. How did we meet?" Nina sat on the edge of an expensive sofa, afraid to wrinkle it. "The truth is easiest to remember. We met at the diner. Good. And we fell in love because... ... Lucas paused, looking genuinely stumped. "Because you saw past the uniform to the person underneath," Nina said quietly. "And I saw past the money to the man inside." Lucas looked at her with something like surprise. "That's actually perfect." The first test, the Hendersons arrived at 7 sharp. Richard Henderson was a silver-haired man with sharp eyes that missed nothing. His wife Catherine had the warm smile of a grandmother, but the assessment skills of a prosecutor. "Lucas, my boy," Richard boomed, shaking hands. "And this must be the lovely bride we've heard about." Nina extended her hand, praying it wasn't shaking. "Nina Brennan. It's wonderful to meet you both." Catherine took her hand in both of hers. How romantic. A whirlwind courtship. "Lucas, you dark horse. When did you propose?" Lucas moved smoothly to Nina's side, his hand finding the small of her back. The touch sent electricity up her spine. 2 weeks ago? I couldn't wait any longer. When you know, you know. They moved to the dining room, where a catered meal awaited. Nina had never seen so many forks beside one plate. She watched Lucas carefully, copying which utensil he used for each course. "So Nina, what do you do?" Catherine asked over the soup course. "I work at a diner," Nina said, deciding honesty was safer than invention. "The Red Rose, where Lucas and I met." Richard raised his eyebrows. "A working woman. I admire that. Too many young people today expect everything handed to them." "Nina works harder than anyone I know," Lucas said, and something in his voice made her look at him. He was gazing at her with what looked like genuine admiration. "She's been supporting her family since she was 19. The lie detector in Nina's brain screamed that they had never discussed her family. How did he know that? Revealed truths after the Hendersons left. It's promising to finalize the business deal at tomorrow's meeting. Nina confronted Lucas in the kitchen. "How did you know about my family?" Lucas had the grace to look embarrassed. "I may have done some research before proposing this arrangement. I needed to know you were trustworthy." "You investigated me?" Nina felt violated and oddly touched at once. "I'm sorry. It was wrong." Lucas poured 2 glasses of wine. "But I learned you've been working since you were 19 to support your mother and brother. You dropped out of college to pay for your mother's first cancer treatment. Miguel is in medical school because of your sacrifices." Nina took the wine glass, her hand shaking. "You had no right." "I know. But it made me certain you were the right person." Lucas met her eyes. "You understand what it means to fight for family." "So do I. Your family owns half the hotels in this city," Nina said bitterly. "My father owns them," Lucas corrected. "I built my company from nothing. He cut me off when I refused to join the family business. Said I'd come crawling back within a year." Jaw tightened. "That was 8 years ago. We haven't spoken since." Nina saw the pain he tried to hide. "That's why this deal matters so much. It's not just business. It's proof I don't need him," Lucas admitted quietly. "Childish, I know." "No," Nina said softly. "It's human." Unexpected connection, they stayed up talking, the wine loosening tongues and lowering guards. Lucas told her about growing up in a mansion that felt like a museum, where every action was judged, every friendship calculated for advantage. Nina shared stories of her cramped but love-filled childhood, before her father left and before cancer stole her mother's strength. "I wanted to be a teacher," Nina confessed. "Work with kids. Make a difference." "Seems silly now." "It's not silly at all," Lucas said firmly. "After this month, with the money, you could go back to school." The reminder that this was temporary. That in 30 days they would part as strangers. Hurt more than Nina expected. "It's late," she said, standing abruptly. "Big day tomorrow." Lucas stood too. "Nina, thank you. For tonight, for this, you were perfect." Their eyes met and held. For a moment, the air between them crackled with something neither wanted to name. "Night." "Lucas," Nina whispered. Fleeing to her room before she did something foolish, the threat emerges the next morning. Nina woke to raised voices. She found Lucas in the living room, facing a stunning woman in a red power suit. "Julia," Lucas said coldly. "What are you doing here?" "Meeting your little pretend wife," Julia purred, her eyes raking over Nina in her pajamas. "Did you really think you could fool everyone, Lucas? I know this marriage is fake." Nina's blood ran cold. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Please," Julia laughed. "Lucas proposes 2 weeks after I leave him. And to a waitress. It's obviously a business arrangement." "You don't know anything," Lucas said, but his voice lacked conviction. Julia smiled like a cat with cream. "I know Richard Henderson values honesty above all else." "What do you think he'll do when he learns you've been lying to him?" "What do you want?" Nina asked, stepping forward. Julia's smile widened. "Smart girl." "I want Lucas to drop the deal with Henderson and sign with my new employer instead. Do that and your secret stays safe." "Get out," Lucas said through gritted teeth. "You have 24 hours to decide," Julia said, walking to the elevator. "Choose wisely, darling. The choice." So after Julia left, Silence filled the penthouse. Nina felt the weight of their deception crushing down. "I'm sorry," Lucas said finally. "This is my fault." "We both signed that contract," Nina reminded him. "But Lucas, if she tells the Hendersons, you lose everything." "Not everything," Lucas said quietly, looking at her. "Some things are worth more than business deals." Nina's heart stuttered. Don't say things like that when this isn't real, isn't it?" Lucas moved closer. "These past 2 days, getting to know you, talking with you, laughing with you, that felt real to me, Lucas." Nina's voice broke. "We have a contract. 30 days. Then I go back to my life, and you go back to yours. What if I don't want that anymore?" The words hung between them, dangerous and tempting. Nina wanted to close the distance, to let herself believe that a millionaire and a waitress could have something real. Instead, she stepped back. "We have 24 hours to figure out how to save your deal. Let's focus on that." The hurt in Lucas's eyes nearly broke her resolve. But Nina had learned long ago that fairy tales didn't happen to girls like her. Some gaps were too wide to cross, no matter how much you wanted to try. Nina's phone rang at 3 in the morning. She knew before answering that it was bad news. "Good news never came at 3 in the morning, Miss Torres." The nurse's voice was gentle but urgent. "Your mother's condition has deteriorated. The doctor says we need to begin treatment immediately or we'll lose the window of opportunity." Nina sat up in bed, her heart pounding. "How immediately?" "Within the next 48 hours. We'll need the payment cleared before we can proceed." Nina's mind raced. The contract specified payment after 30 days. She was only on day 4. "I'll have the money tomorrow," she promised. Praying it was true, she found Lucas already awake in the kitchen, reviewing documents for the Henderson meeting scheduled for that afternoon. "My mother," Nina said without preamble. "I need my payment early. Tomorrow at the latest." Lucas looked up, concern flooding his features. "What happened?" Nina explained, her voice steady, despite the fear clawing at her chest. "I know it's not what we agreed, but I wouldn't ask if it wasn't life or death." "Consider it done," Lucas said immediately, reaching for his phone. "I'll have my bank manager arrange an emergency transfer this morning." "Just like that?" Nina stared at him. "Just like that." Lucas set down his phone. "Nina, this arrangement was supposed to help us both. If your mother needs help now, then that's what matters." The kindness undid something in Nina's carefully constructed walls. "Thank you," she whispered, tears threatening. Lucas crossed to her, hesitating only a moment before pulling her into his arms. Nina let herself lean into his warmth, just for a moment. Pretending this comfort was real. The impossible decision at noon, Julia called. "Time's up, Lucas. What's your decision?" Lucas looked at Nina, who sat across from him at the breakfast table. The Henderson meeting was in 3 hours. Julia's threat hung over them like a storm cloud. "I'm going through with the Henderson deal," Lucas said firmly. "Then I'll tell them everything," Julia warned. "Your fake marriage, your desperate lies. Richard Henderson will never do business with you again." "Do what you have to do," Lucas said, and hung up. Nina grabbed his arm. "Lucas, you'll lose everything you've worked for." "Not everything," he said, covering her hand with his. "I'd lose everything if I let Julia blackmail me. If I give up my integrity. If I let fear make my decisions. But your company, your employees will survive somehow," Lucas interrupted. "Nina, I've spent 8 years trying to prove something to my father. Trying to show him I could succeed without him. But in doing that, I became just like him. Cold, calculating, willing to use people." He stood, pacing to the windows overlooking the city. "These past few days with you have shown me what I've been missing. Real connection. Honest conversation. Someone who sees me, not my bank account." Nina's heart hammered against her ribs. "Lucas, don't confuse gratitude with something else." He turned to face her. "Is that what you think this is? Gratitude." The Henderson meeting, began promptly at 3. Richard and Catherine arrived with their lawyer, ready to sign the contracts that would save Lucas's company. Julia arrived 5 minutes later. "Richard, Catherine, how wonderful to see you again," Julia said sweetly. "Uninvited." I hope I'm not interrupting, Miss Santander, Richard said coolly. This is a private meeting. I know, but I have information you'll want to hear before signing anything with Lucas. Julia's smile was poison wrapped in silk. His marriage is a sham. A business arrangement to fool you into thinking he's a family man, Catherine gasped. Richard's expression turned to granite. That's quite an accusation, Richard said slowly, looking at Lucas. Is there any truth to this? Nina watched Lucas's jaw tighten. This was it. The moment he could lie, could try to salvage the deal, could sacrifice truth for success. Instead, Lucas stood. Yes, it's true. The words fell like bombs. Catherine's hand flew to her chest. Richard's face darkened. But it's not the whole truth, Lucas continued. I met Nina 6 months ago. She was my waitress, and over time, I came to admire her strength, her kindness, her courage. When Julia left me and I faced losing this deal, I panicked. I asked Nina to pretend to be my wife. Julia's smile widened triumphantly. But somewhere between pretending and reality, Lucas said, his eyes finding Nina's. I fell in love with her, completely, terrifyingly. Real love. Nina couldn't breathe. The marriage certificate might be a piece of paper filed in haste, Lucas continued, but my feelings are genuine. Nina is the best person I've ever met. She works 3 jobs to save her mother's life. She put her brother through medical school. She dreams of becoming a teacher so she can help children. He turned back to the Hendersons. I lied to you because I was desperate to prove myself. That was wrong. But I'm not lying about loving her. That's the truest thing I've ever said. The truth-revealed silence filled the room. Julia looked confused, her triumph fading. Catherine had tears in her eyes. Richard studied Lucas with an unreadable expression. Miss Torres, Richard said finally, is what he says true? Do you love him? All eyes turned to Nina. She could lie, could protect the arrangement, could keep her walls firmly in place, or she could risk everything. I didn't want to, Nina said, her voice shaking. I told myself it was just business, just a job. But yes, somewhere between the pretending and the late-night conversations and the way he looks at me like I matter, I fell in love with him too. Lucas's eyes blazed with hope. Even though he's a millionaire and I'm a waitress, Nina continued, even though we come from different worlds, even though this terrifies me, I love him. Julia made a sound of disgust. How touching. But it doesn't change that they lied to you. No, it doesn't, Richard agreed. He stood, and Lucas visibly braced for rejection, which is why we're rewriting this contract. Everyone stared, rewriting it. Lucas repeated. I built my fortune on taking chances on people, not just numbers, Richard said. Yes, you lied. Yes, you tried to manipulate us. But you also just risked everything to tell the truth. He looked at Nina. And you, young lady, remind me of my Catherine 50 years ago, working 3 jobs, dreaming of teaching, too proud to ask for help. Catherine nodded, smiling. I was a secretary when Richard met me. His father threatened to disinherit him if he married me. Best decision I ever made, Richard said warmly. So here's my offer, Lucas. We'll do this deal. But I'm also investing in Nina's education fund. When she goes back to school to become a teacher, it's on me, Nina gasped. I can't accept that. You're not accepting anything, Catherine said kindly. You're accepting an investment in someone who will make a difference in children's lives. Julia stood abruptly. This is ridiculous. You're rewarding them for lying? We're rewarding honesty when it costs something, Richard corrected. Lucas could have kept lying. He chose truth instead. That's the kind of partner I want. He extended his hand to Lucas. Do we have a deal? Lucas shook his hand, looking dazed. Yes, thank you. Julia stormed out, her heels clicking angrily on the marble floor. New beginnings after the Hendersons left. Nina and Lucas stood alone in the conference room. The city sparkled below them, full of possibility. So, Lucas said softly, what now? Now we figure out what's real, Nina said. No more contracts. No more pretending. Just us. Just us, Lucas agreed. A millionaire and a waitress. A man and a woman, Nina corrected, stepping closer, who happened to have found something real in the middle of something fake. Lucas cupped her face gently. I meant what I said. I love you, Nina Torres. I love you too, Lucas Brennan, she whispered. Their kiss was nothing like the staged affection they'd shown the Hendersons. This was real, raw, and full of promise. When they finally pulled apart, Lucas smiled. Your mother's treatment starts tomorrow. I want to be there with you. You don't have to. I want to, Lucas insisted. I want to meet the woman who raised someone as extraordinary as you. Nina's eyes filled with tears. What about the contract? The 30 days? Tear it up, Lucas said. I don't want 30 days. I want forever. If you'll have me. We barely know each other, Nina protested weakly. Then we'll take our time learning, Lucas promised. No pressure. No expectations. Just to people who found something worth keeping. Nina looked around the conference room where everything had almost fallen apart. Sometimes the best things came from the most desperate moments. Sometimes pretending led to truth. Sometimes a waitress and a millionaire could bridge the gap between their worlds. Forever sounds perfect, she said, and kissed him again. 6 months later, Nina stood in front of her first classroom as a student teacher, made possible by the Henderson scholarship. Lucas sat in the back row, watching her teach, with the same admiration he'd felt that first night in the diner. They were married for real now. A small ceremony with only family and close friends. No pretending, no contracts, just love. And every Tuesday night, they went back to the Red Rose Diner, where it all began, where a desperate proposal became the greatest truth either of them had ever known.